Most women lose years trying to decode men. What if I told you it only takes 3 questions? Ask the wrong ones, and you stay confused. Ask the right ones, and the truth can't hide. You were never meant to chase signs, analyze silences, or read between broken lines. The masculine heart doesn't reveal itself under pressure. It reveals itself under clarity. Carl Jung understood something most relationships ignore. A man shows who he is when he's invited to speak from meaning, responsibility, and vision. Not feelings, not promises, structure. In this video, you'll discover the 3 questions that quietly dismantle masks, expose emotional maturity, and protect your dignity. These aren't tricks, they're mirrors. Ask them, and you won't need reassurance anymore, because reality will speak for itself. And once you hear it, you'll never relate the same way again. You've probably noticed this already. The harder you try to read a man, the more confusing he becomes. You watch his tone, his timing, his silence, his texts. You connect dots that were never meant to connect, and yet something still feels off. That's because behavior is often a costume, not a confession. Most men learn early how to perform strength, calm, or confidence. It's survival. But here's the quiet truth. Masks don't dissolve under pressure. They dissolve under the right kind of presence, the kind that doesn't interrogate, doesn't chase, doesn't demand. When the environment feels safe, the masculine psyche stops acting and starts revealing. Think of the heart like a locked room. Force the door and it resists. Shake the handle and it stays shut. But slide the right key in gently and it opens without a fight. The right questions do exactly that. They don't corner him, they invite him. They don't ask for proof, they ask for meaning, and meaning is where truth lives. That's why clarity doesn't come from watching harder, it comes from listening deeper. When you ask a man something that touches his inner values, his emotional maturity, his sense of purpose, you bypass the mask entirely. No strategy required, no emotional gymnastics, just truth rising on its own. You can see this play out in real life. Picture a casual conversation, coffee, no pressure, no expectations. Instead of asking, "Where is this going?" you ask something quieter, something grounded. You listen not just to what he says, but how he organizes his thoughts. Is there coherence? Is there ownership? Or does everything feel vague and reactive? This is how you read the masculine psyche without trying to control it. You're not testing him, you're observing structure. And structure always reveals more than charm. Charm fades. Structure repeats. Here's where your inner strength matters. If you ask these questions while secretly hoping for a specific answer, you'll miss the truth. But when you ask from clarity, something powerful happens. You stop chasing certainty and start recognizing reality. That's when emotional maturity grows on both sides. You're no longer dependent on mixed signals or anxious interpretations. You're grounded in self-responsibility. You don't need reassurance every 5 minutes because you're learning how to read consistency, not intensity. That shift alone saves years of emotional energy. And here's the part most people don't talk about. When you ask questions that bypass the mask, you're not just revealing him, you're revealing yourself. Your boundaries become clearer, your intuition sharpens, your inner strength stabilizes. You stop negotiating with confusion. You stop romanticizing potential. You start seeing what's real, sometimes quietly disappointing, sometimes surprisingly solid. And as you notice this shift, you'll feel something else building underneath. A deeper curiosity about what truly drives a man when love, pressure, and performance are stripped away. Here's where things get real and fast. If you want to understand a man beyond attraction, beyond words, beyond temporary effort, you look at meaning. Meaning is the compass of the masculine psyche. Ask a man what makes his life worth living, and you're not asking about hobbies or weekend plans. You're asking where his inner weight rests. Some men orbit approval, others orbit obligation, a few orbit purpose. And you can feel the difference immediately. The way he answers tells you if he's driven by fear, external validation, or an internal direction that doesn't collapse when no one is watching. Think of meaning like the foundation of a house. You can decorate the walls, repaint the rooms, add lights and music, but if the foundation is weak, the structure won't last. Love works the same way. A man can say the right things, show up intensely, even seem emotionally present. But if there's no internal axis, no sense of purpose holding him upright, everything eventually tilts. That's why clarity matters more than chemistry. Chemistry excites, purpose stabilizes, and stability is what turns attraction into something sustainable. You'll notice this in practical ways. Ask him what gives his life direction, and listen carefully. Does he speak with ownership, or does he list distractions? Does he talk about what he's building, or only what he's escaping? A man connected to meaning doesn't need to impress. His words are simple, grounded, sometimes even quiet. He might say something like, "I want to become reliable to myself," or "I want my work to matter." That tone reveals emotional maturity far more than grand promises ever could. This question also protects you from confusion. Many women mistake effort for depth. A man can try hard and still be lost. Effort without direction burns out quickly. Meaning, on the other hand, generates consistency. When you hear what anchors him, you begin to see how he'll act when life gets uncomfortable, because it always does. Purpose doesn't disappear under stress. It shows itself even more clearly. And that's where self-responsibility comes in. A man with meaning doesn't outsource his life to circumstances or people. He carries it. As you sit with his answer, something subtle happens inside you. You stop fantasizing about what could be and start recognizing what is. That's inner strength forming. You're no longer negotiating with hope alone. You're reading structure, direction, and coherence. And once you see where his axis is, another question naturally begins to surface in your mind. Because meaning shapes values, but values are tested under pressure. And pressure always reveals the truth of emotional maturity. This is where many women get quietly misled. You're taught to look for feelings first, words of affection, intensity, emotional availability. But love, especially spoken love, is one of the easiest things to rehearse. It sounds convincing, it feels warm, and yet it often floats without weight. Love isn't the first test because love alone doesn't reveal structure. Values do, direction does, meaning does. When you prioritize those, you stop mistaking emotional noise for emotional depth. You begin to see what actually holds when excitement fades. Think of love like a beautiful melody. It can move you, stir you, even make you cry. But values are the rhythm underneath. Without rhythm, the song falls apart. A man may say he loves you sincerely and still be unable to sustain a healthy relationship. That doesn't make him evil, it makes him unanchored. Emotional maturity shows itself not in what he feels in the moment, but in what he's willing to stand for consistently. Love without values is like sailing with strong wind, but no compass. You'll notice this when you stop asking, "How does he feel about me?" and start observing, what does he live by? Does he value honesty when it's inconvenient? Responsibility when no one is watching? Growth when comfort would be easier? These patterns matter more than emotional declarations. A man can feel deeply and still avoid accountability, and avoidance over time erodes trust. That's why clarity protects your inner strength. You're no longer dazzled by emotion alone. You're grounded in reality. Here's a practical shift you can make. Instead of leaning into emotional reassurance, lean into observation. When conflict arises, does he default to excuses or reflection? When plans change, does he communicate or disappear? These are not dramatic moments, but they're revealing. Love talks loudly, values whisper, but they repeat. And repetition is where truth lives. When you learn to read patterns instead of promises, confusion loses its grip on you. As this awareness settles in, something else becomes impossible to ignore. Values aren't proven in comfort. They're exposed under tension. Everyone looks kind when life is smooth. The real question is, what happens when things don't go his way? That's where emotional maturity either appears or collapses. And without realizing it, your attention naturally shifts toward a deeper inquiry. How does he actually deal with frustration, loss, and things beyond his control? Here's the truth most people learn the hard way. You don't really meet someone when life is working. You meet them when it isn't. Frustration is the great revealer. When plans fall apart, when effort doesn't pay off, when control slips through the fingers, the masculine psyche reacts almost automatically. And that reaction tells you more than months of smooth conversations ever could. Emotional maturity isn't about staying calm all the time. It's about what he does with tension once it shows up. Think of frustration like pressure on metal. Weak material bends, cracks, or blames the hammer. Strong material adapts shape without losing integrity. Some men shut down and go silent. Others deflect, turning disappointment into sarcasm or blame. A few pause, reflect, and adjust. None of these reactions are theoretical. You'll hear them in his stories. How he talks about failure, conflict, or loss reveals whether he's living from self-responsibility or emotional avoidance. And once you know this, clarity replaces hope-based guessing. You can observe this without creating drama. Listen to how he describes a bad day at work, a missed opportunity, a broken plan. Does he speak as a victim of circumstances or as an agent within them? Does he say, "They ruined everything," or "I didn't handle that well"? That single difference signals emotional maturity. A man who owns his response, even imperfectly, has an internal structure. One who externalizes everything will eventually externalize responsibility in the relationship too. This is where your inner strength quietly activates. Instead of trying to soothe, fix, or carry emotional weight that isn't yours, you observe. You don't correct him. You don't teach him. You don't rescue him from discomfort. You allow him to reveal how he metabolizes frustration. That alone protects your energy. You stop stepping into roles you were never meant to play. Therapist, mother, motivator. Clarity once again becomes an act of self-respect. As you witness how he handles pressure, another layer of truth begins to surface. Frustration doesn't just expose coping, it exposes consciousness. Is he aware of his patterns or trapped inside them? That awareness, or lack of it, sets the tone for everything that follows. And naturally, your attention drifts towards something even more telling. Because how a man handles the present is important, but how he relates to his future reveals where his life is actually heading. When you ask a man about his future, you're not asking for a plan, you're listening for ownership. Vision isn't about timelines or polished goals. It's about whether he sees himself as the author of his life or merely a passenger. A man with vision speaks from the inside out. He may hesitate, even pause in silence, but there's weight behind his words. That pause matters. It tells you he's actually checking in with himself instead of performing for you. And that's rare. Think of vision like a horizon line. You don't need to reach it to know which direction you're walking. Some men live day to day, reacting to whatever comes next. Others carry an inner north, even when the road is unclear. When he talks about what he expects of himself, how he wants to grow, contribute, or become, you're hearing his internal contract. Not with you, with himself. And self-responsibility always shows up there first. You'll recognize the difference immediately. Generic answers feel weightless. "I just want to be happy," or "I don't think too far ahead." There's nothing wrong with simplicity, but emptiness hides inside vagueness. A man with emotional maturity might say something modest yet grounded, like wanting to build stability, develop skill, or become more reliable over time. He doesn't need to impress. Vision rooted in reality sounds calm, not grandiose. It feels steady, not rushed. This question also gives you clarity about alignment. You're not judging ambition, you're sensing direction. Two people don't need identical paths, but their trajectories must be compatible. If his vision is avoidance, drift, or endless postponement, you'll feel it in your body before you explain it in words. And instead of negotiating yourself into patience, you can simply acknowledge what's there. That's inner strength in action, choosing based on clarity rather than potential. As you listen, something else quietly emerges. Vision isn't just about the future. It reflects how someone relates to time itself. Does he grow through experience or repeat cycles unconsciously? That awareness becomes crucial because patterns don't disappear on their own. And once you see how he positions himself toward what's ahead, another realization begins to form. Because vision only matters if it holds under pressure, consistency, and time. One of the most uncomfortable lessons you'll ever learn is this: silence speaks. Not the peaceful kind, but the evasive one. The pauses that feel empty, the answers that slide away instead of landing. Many people mistake silence for mystery, depth, or emotional complexity, but often it's simply avoidance. When a man can't articulate meaning, responsibility, or direction, his silence isn't neutral, it's informative. And once you learn to read it, confusion loses its power over you. Think of silence like fog on the road. If you keep driving fast, hoping clarity will suddenly appear, you crash. But if you slow down and observe, you realize the fog is the message. Vague responses, jokes that deflect, constant topic changes. These aren't accidents. They reveal a relationship with himself. Emotional maturity doesn't mean having perfect answers. It means being able to stay present when the answer isn't clear. Avoidance, on the other hand, always hides behind noise or emptiness. You can notice this in simple conversations. Ask something meaningful and see what happens. Does he lean in, even if he struggles? Or does he retreat into abstraction and generalities? A man who says, "I've never really thought about that," and stays with the question shows more inner strength than one who fills the space with clever words. Silence with awareness is different from silence with evasion. Your body will sense which one you're witnessing long before your mind explains it. Here's where your role changes completely. You don't rush to fill the gap. You don't rescue the moment. You don't soften the discomfort. You let the silence stand. That choice alone signals emotional maturity on your part. You're no longer negotiating for clarity. You're allowing reality to reveal itself. This protects your energy in ways nothing else does. You stop working harder than the relationship itself. You stop translating ambiguity into hope. And as you grow comfortable with silence, something unexpected happens. You start hearing patterns instead of isolated moments. You notice how often depth is avoided, how often meaning slips away. This awareness naturally leads you to a deeper strength. Not reacting, not chasing, not fixing, just standing firmly in observation. And from that grounded place, another shift begins to emerge. Because listening without interference is not passivity, it's authority. Most people think strength shows up when you speak, when you explain, when you correct, when you prove your point. But real strength often appears when you don't. Listening without correction is one of the most underestimated forms of inner power. It requires confidence, not passivity. When you resist the urge to adjust his words, soften his meaning, or guide him toward a better answer, you create a space where truth can stand on its own legs. Think of it like holding a mirror instead of a brush. A brush tries to fix the image. A mirror simply reflects. When you listen without interruption, without emotional steering, you stop influencing the outcome. And that's crucial, because influence distorts clarity. A man who feels corrected will perform. A man who feels observed will reveal. This is how emotional maturity is invited to the surface, quietly, without force. You'll feel the temptation, though. When he says something confusing, part of you will want to rephrase it for him. When he hesitates, you'll want to help. When he avoids depth, you may want to pull him back. But every time you do that, you take responsibility for his inner work. Instead, try this. Stay silent. Nod. Let him finish. Let the discomfort breathe. What follows is often more honest than anything you could have prompted. This posture protects your inner strength in a powerful way. You stop over-functioning emotionally. You stop carrying conversations that should be shared. You stop shaping the narrative to feel safer, and paradoxically, this calm presence often earns more respect than emotional effort ever could. You're no longer negotiating meaning, you're witnessing it. And witnessing is an act of self-responsibility. As you practice this kind of listening, something shifts inside you. You begin to trust time. You realize that truth doesn't need to be rushed. Patterns emerge naturally when you don't interfere. And as those patterns become visible, another realization starts forming beneath the surface. Because listening without correction isn't just about hearing words. It's about recognizing when it's time to choose. Waiting feels passive, but it's emotionally expensive. Choosing feels risky, but it's liberating. The moment you stop waiting to be chosen, something fundamental shifts inside you. Your posture changes. Your energy reorganizes. You're no longer standing at the edge of someone else's decision. You're standing at the center of your own. This is where inner strength becomes visible, not through words, but through calm certainty. You're not cold, you're clear, and clarity has weight. Think of waiting like standing in an airport without a ticket, watching planes take off and hoping one will stop for you. Choosing is buying your own ticket. It doesn't guarantee a smooth flight, but it gives you direction. When you choose, you stop outsourcing your worth to someone else's availability. You begin to evaluate alignment instead of chasing reassurance. Emotional maturity grows when you realize that uncertainty isn't solved by patience alone. It's solved by discernment. You can feel this in everyday moments. You no longer overanalyze delayed messages. You don't rehearse conversations in your head. You observe consistency over time instead of intensity and bursts. When something doesn't sit right, you don't immediately justify it. You pause, you let the pattern repeat, or not. Choosing doesn't mean walking away at the first discomfort. It means staying present without abandoning yourself. That's a rare balance, and it changes how you're perceived. Here's the paradox. When you stop waiting, you become more attractive, not because you're trying, but because you're grounded. People feel it. A man senses when a woman is choosing from clarity rather than fear. There's no urgency in her tone, no tension in her eyes. She's engaged but not dependent. That presence invites respect, not pursuit games. It's the quiet authority of someone who knows she has options because she knows herself. As this way of being settles in, something else becomes obvious. Choosing doesn't harden you, it refines you. You feel more open, not less, more discerning, not defensive. And as you stand in this place of self-responsibility, another question naturally arises, not about him, but about you. Because the deepest clarity always turns inward before it reshapes your relationships. Truth is often misunderstood as something harsh, cold, or destabilizing. But in reality, truth is what protects you. It protects your dignity, your energy, and your sense of self. When you see clearly, without embellishment, without denial, you stop bargaining with confusion. You stop asking, what if, and start recognizing this is. And that recognition, even when it hurts, stabilizes you. Emotional maturity grows when you choose reality over fantasy, clarity over comfort. Think of truth like a solid floor beneath your feet. Lies, half-truths, and wishful thinking feel like walking on loose sand, every step uncertain, every movement exhausting. Truth doesn't promise pleasure, but it promises ground. When a man reveals who he is, through words, silence, or patterns, you no longer have to guess where you stand. And when you know where you stand, you regain your inner strength. You stop twisting yourself to fit ambiguity. This doesn't mean the absence of pain. Sometimes truth ends a story you hoped would continue, but notice the difference. Pain that comes from truth is clean. It doesn't linger as self-doubt. It doesn't rot into resentment. You grieve, you process, and you move. Pain that comes from denial, on the other hand, drains you slowly. It keeps you stuck in loops of interpretation. Truth shortens suffering by giving it a direction. In practical terms, this is where self-responsibility becomes visible. You stop asking others to define your worth. You stop needing closure conversations that go nowhere. You accept what's shown, not what's promised. That acceptance doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. You invest where there is coherence. You withdraw where there is contradiction. That discernment is a form of respect toward yourself. And as you anchor yourself in truth, something profound begins to happen internally. You realize that dignity isn't maintained by holding on. It's maintained by seeing clearly and choosing accordingly. This awareness doesn't close your heart. It steadies it. And from that steadiness, a deeper transformation quietly starts to unfold, because once truth is integrated, the final shift is no longer about him, it's about the woman you're becoming. At some point, something subtle but irreversible happens. You realize this journey was never only about understanding a man, it was about meeting yourself with honesty. Every question you asked him quietly echoed back to you. What gives your life meaning? How do you face frustration? What do you expect of yourself over time? This is where emotional maturity deepens. You stop outsourcing clarity and start living from it. And once that happens, relationships stop being a battlefield and become a mirror. Think of this transformation like learning to stand upright after years of leaning. At first, it feels unfamiliar. You may even feel exposed. But soon, you notice how much energy you are wasting trying to be understood, chosen, or reassured. Inner strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as calm, as patience, as the ability to remain present without shrinking. You're no longer proving your worth. You're inhabiting it. You see this reflected in your daily choices. You don't rush conversations to secure outcomes. You don't cling to potential. You don't abandon yourself to keep someone close. Instead, you observe. You decide. You move forward with self-responsibility. This doesn't make you rigid. It makes you real. And reality, while less dramatic than fantasy, is infinitely more nourishing. You begin to feel safe inside your own perception. This is where dignity becomes embodied, not defended. You can feel deeply without dissolving. You can love without losing your axis. When a connection works, it's mutual growth. When it doesn't, the loss hurts, but it doesn't fracture. Jung believed that integration happens when a person stops running from truth and starts living in alignment with it. You're no longer chasing reassurance, you're walking with coherence. And as this integration settles in, something else becomes unmistakable. The quality of men you attract shifts, not because you demand more, but because you are more grounded. You don't negotiate with confusion anymore. You recognize resonance when it appears, and misalignment when it doesn't. And standing there, firmly rooted in yourself, you sense that everything you've learned so far is only the beginning, because clarity doesn't end the journey. It changes how you walk it. Now, it's on you. Knowledge only becomes power when it moves your behavior. These questions don't work if they stay theoretical, saved, or admired from a distance. They work when you live them, when you listen without correcting, observe without rushing, and choose without fear. The next time you're in a meaningful conversation, notice what happens when you stop chasing clarity and let clarity come to you. What patterns are repeating? What answers feel grounded and which feel empty? Ask yourself this honestly. Are you reacting to intensity or responding to consistency? Are you trying to be chosen or are you choosing? And most importantly, what do you expect from yourself in love, in boundaries, in self-respect? The quality of your relationships will never exceed the quality of your inner position. When you apply what you've learned here, confusion fades, dignity strengthens, and your emotional energy finally works for you, not against you. So here's the challenge. Apply one of these questions in real life this week. Don't interrogate, don't test, just listen. Then observe how your perception sharpens and your anxiety softens. If this video shifted something inside you, let me know in the comments what stood out the most. And if you want to keep learning how clarity, psychology, and inner strength transform relationships, subscribe to Mind's Silent Echo and turn on notifications. This journey gets deeper, and you don't have to walk it blindly.